I got stares, but I didn't have anybody spit on me or say anything. There was just stares. I didn't know what that was about. I just thought it was just because I looked so crazy having come back, with that Vietnam look on my face.
Mhm.
So, but no one was abusive. I hear that was not always the case. Some
Yeah,
men were
sure.
yeah,
It was
not
it was
treated fairly.
yeah, it was not a good time in terms of in our nation and how we treated the people that went to Vietnam to fight.
No.
Welcome to Old God Talks to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. Ladies, if you want to know what your guy is thinking, this podcast is for women too. Each week, a special guest helps you create that life you've imagined. We talk anti-aging medicine, personal growth, relationships and hot sex. Yeah, you hear me, getting laid more frequently, other guy vices, and topics that many don't want to talk about but need to. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you have to be old. Don't want to miss anything? Be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to go to www.thestandard.academy/magazine and grab a free copy of our new digital magazine, The Standard Academy, where we talk about erogenous zones, growing hair back, and other things that will help you create that kick-ass life. Now get ready to listen up and share with friends.
Did you ever think you were going to die?
Yes, I did. And one mission in particular, the aircraft was damaged. I mean, we didn't know exactly. I mean, we knew something had gone wrong. A bullet came through the windshield, and we got we were picking up a baby. I describe it in the book, and we were picking up a baby that had been found by some troops. The baby was unhurt but abandoned, and the troops called us out, and we picked the baby up, and a bullet came through the windshield and went into the housing of the engine housing and had damaged one of the controls, one that allowed us to ascend and descend properly. And so the collective. And so when I tried to get the ship to descend, it was not working properly. I couldn't get it to descend. And the aircraft did a unusual maneuver, and I thought, this is it. We're gonna crash. And it turns out, God was on my side, and I thank my late Aunt Vivian for that. I think she prayed for me and kept me alive. But whatever it was, I managed to get the ship down. I was the aircraft commander for that mission. I got the ship down in one piece, undamaged. And in fact, sometime later, back in the States, I got a call from. I described the incident. I got a call on the intercom, for the PA system. Excuse me. By then, I was a captain. Most of the time in Vietnam, all the time in Vietnam, I was a lieutenant. But as soon as I landed back in the States, just about, I became a captain. But Captain Sampson, can you come down to the colonel's office? I'm thinking, oh Lord, what did I do now? Well, I walked in, and they were presenting me with a Broken Wing Award. And that's not awarded that often. It's awarded by the Aviation Command, and it's for landing an aircraft getting an aircraft down that should not have been landable. But God was on my side.
Yeah. Hence broken wing.
Hence a broken wing. That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
I think it's self-explanatory.
Yeah.
So, nowadays, everything is so much faster, and there's so much equipment on a helicopter bringing out people.
Right.
How did you deal with people that died on your helicopter?
Doc, I consider myself to be blessed. And the blessing is, I think my unit had fabulous medics who kept men who who were heading towards death, kept them alive. We never delivered a person to the hospital who was deceased. Everybody that I remember seeing was alive. So that was during my period as an aircraft commander. I do remember one of the earlier missions when I was a pilot. In some parts of some of the aviators call the pilot the Peter pilot. I never heard that term when I was serving in but it just meant there were two aviators. One was the pilot, who was one of the two and sat in the front, and the other one was the aircraft commander, who was in charge of the aircraft and getting the crew out to do whatever they were going to do and getting them back safely. And so, and being an aircraft, the Army treated that as a meritocracy, and so that it took time for you to get the experience, the tactical experience as a pilot, to get the orders to be appointed as an aircraft commander. Bottom line is, when I was a pilot early on, I remember an ARVN troop, Army of Vietnam, ARVN, of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, probably was ARVN. He had been shot right between the eyes, and I remember the crew reluctantly put him on board, but the people on the ground were asking us to do so because they didn't want to have to carry the corpse with them.
Right.
And they asked us to do so. That was the only person I saw that I can remember who was deceased. The medics did an incredible job, and one of my medics in particular, I used to think he had 13 hands. I mean, those men and he was patching them up, getting IV started with saline solution, saying what he had to say to keep them alert and alive, and we got them to the hospital alive. And again, it wasn't, I was just flying. The medics were doing the patching up, and the crew chief was helping them in the back. And my hat's off to them, because they were dauntless. They were incredible.
Well, so your tour of duty ends in Vietnam.
Yes.
And you come back to the States. Where'd you come back to?
I came back to, I landed in Seattle, Washington, and then got a commercial flight from Seattle back to Maryland. I'm a Baltimorean, where I lived. A number of veterans who were smarter than me or something, immediately when they landed, they took off their uniforms and put on civvies. I didn't know to do that, and I had on my uniform. But frankly, I got stares, but I didn't have anybody spit on me or say anything. There was just stares. I didn't know what that was about. I just thought it was just because I looked so crazy, having come back, with that Vietnam look on my face. But no one was abusive. I hear that was not always the case. Some men were not treated fairly.
Yeah, it was not a good time in our nation and how we treated the people that went to Vietnam to fight.
No.
So you get back to Baltimore, and how is the process of readjusting from a war zone to a civilian place? What's that like? Because I mean, you're obviously just, I mean, all of a sudden you're in relatively safe place.
Well, the truth be known, I personally I didn't know it, but I was stunned. I mean, I was shocked, and I didn't realize it, but for the first 2 years, maybe 3, I was still counting my fingers and toes, thinking, did I really make it back? Did this really happen? I mean, because sometimes I would think, am I really experiencing this, or am I really in a hospital in Japan missing a foot? Is this real? And so the only person that I can remember really greeting me warmly was my mother.
Mhm.
She was delighted to see her son, her only child, back alive. My friends were ho-hum. I was sent off as a hero. When I got back, they weren't so, they weren't unpleasant. They just weren't, they were just so kind of blasé about it, just ho-hum.
Mhm.
And not having experienced a war before, that defined normal for me. That looked normal
Mhm.
until this sounds crazy, but it's the truth. It wasn't until Desert Storm ended and um, there was a ticker tape parade given for the Desert Storm veterans on Wall Street,
Mhm.
and with all the confetti and the cheers and people lining the streets, and I thought, oh my God. And I didn't realize it, but I started to cry.
You started.
And
You're wondering, where's my parade?
I realized then for the first time that this was what veterans deserved. And that's not what we got. In fact, again, I'm still living in Maryland. I mean, I've been away a little while, but for the most part, I'm a Marylander and a Baltimorean. And I wear a Vietnam veteran cap a lot. And when another veteran sees me, doesn't know me, a lot of times he'll say, welcome home, brother. And I say the same thing, welcome home. This is 50 years later,
Sure.
we're saying that, and we mean it. The reception was very cool. And in fact, the
It was
reception was cruel.
hostile.
It was hostile. It was hostile. It was sometimes very passive hostility, but there was no warmth in it. And because the Vietnam veterans were misunderstood, they were thought to have engaged in atrocities and the like, and that we were there, like we enjoyed it. But people misunderstood. Those were men serving their country and sacrificing their freedom, sometimes a limb, certainly the comforts of civilization, um, and um, and it didn't look like we were really doing anything that we needed to do. But I think that it's possible that our involvement, the United States involvement in Vietnam, may have distracted our adversaries to the point where they did not think about plotting terrorism at that time that they
Sure.
later did, that they later plotted.
Mhm. Yeah. So you're sitting here back in the States,
Mhm.
and I assume you went to the commercial helicopter pilot school pretty quickly after you got back here and everything. And
No,
you no,
no,
oh, you did that. Well, you did. That was a while.
no. I had I qualified for my commercial helicopter pilot's license by virtue of the airtime I had during the
Oh,
war.
okay, okay. So
I
that
did have
helps.
to study the FAA civilian
Mhm.
regulations, and I did that. And just prior to taking the exam, I did go to a prep course, a
Mhm.
weekend prep course.
Sure.
But I had learned enough from the Army. I started out with a 2-year ROTC active duty, post ROTC active duty military obligation. But when I volunteered for flight school, I was told, well, we're going to, Lieutenant, we're going to invest $250,000 in your training, and we're going to add 2 more years to your obligation. Are you okay with that? And I said, sure. I mean, I was, fascinated by the glamour of flying. So
Sure.
I said, sure. So I did 4 years. And so at the end of the 4 years, I decided that, I had enough of the military and got out.
Sure. So Arnold, so you're sitting here in the United States,
Right.
and a few years go by, and you see the images of the evacuation from the embassy, from the U.S. embassy in Saigon.
Mm.
What goes through your mind when you see that? What were you thinking at the time?
Oh my God, mixed emotions. I was outraged that we were leaving the way we were leaving. I was outraged. I'm so sorry that my internet jinx.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I was outraged that. Let's see if I can send a message to that for this far. And I was also saddened for the people who had helped us and who were in desperate fear that there would be retaliation against them when the North Vietnamese came into their towns, their cities, their villages. And I was saddened by that. And, you know, it was terrible to watch. And so it made me wonder what it was we had, you know, accomplished because we were leaving in such a hasty sort of disorganized way. That was very disheartening for me.
Yeah.
Do you need accountability? Are you looking to change the course of your life but have failed to keep on track? Too often we take in information and fail to act. Do you need an accountability program to stay the course? Then go to www.thestandard.academy and find out about my accountability program that goes with my course that helps you find out what you want, why you want it, and how to get it. The accountability program keeps you on track to get results.
Did you have any, how should I say, recollection of that when you saw the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Very much so. Very much so. The withdrawal from Afghanistan really hurt. I mean, and watching people fall off a plane, off of those transport planes who were clinging to the wings, heartbreaking to me. Heartbreaking. You know, that their desperation would have them, you know, cling like that, and to an airplane, futile. But yes, I felt the same way. I mean, I wish we hadn't ended the war, that war, the way we did. But you know, it was what it was. But my heart went out to the Afghanis who
Yeah.
were so terrified of the Taliban and etc.
Yeah, I have interviewed a retired Air Force General David Hicks, who actually trained the Afghani Air Force, and he was very busy getting those Air Force, the pilots and the technicians and their families out of Afghanistan. And
Good for him.
Yeah, he was actually able to get quite a few of them out, but it was real touch and go. And I mean, it was a crazy time how he relates and talks about that, but we talked about that in my podcast with him.
Right.
So you don't really see, you saw what a proper homecoming was when Desert Storm troops came back.
Yes.
And so how, at this point in your life, how do the experiences that you had in Vietnam shape who you are as a man today?
I have regretted, but I am a more paranoid person. I'm not overly trustful of institutions and some causes. I'm just not. But I know that we have a country that's worth defending. I think that we probably have generated over the years, we've generated adversaries in Korea and Russia, maybe Saudi Arabia, who don't think well of us, Iran, who I'm hoping, in China, maybe. I hope they won't one day decide to, to get themselves together. And so I take the threat of military violence directed towards the United States very seriously. And so, I know that something could break out in a flash. I remember, Doc, when it seems to me it was for weeks, maybe months, that the Russians lined up on the border of the Ukraine. And we thought, oh, they'll never go in there. They're not going to go in there. That's easy military. They're just trying to intimidate the Ukraine. And what do we see now? They are decimating the country,
Right.
and killing people, just for no good reason.
Yeah.
And frankly, that could be here.
Oh, I told people don't realize how fragile the life we have is. I mean,
Absolutely.
all those people in Ukraine were leading, because it was actually a fairly, I mean, it had, there's no doubt about there were lots of problems in Ukraine, but they were leading lives that were relatively parallel to ours in terms of economics,
Right.
you know, all the accoutrements, you know, they had, you know,
Right.
I don't know if you know, but this is all because of all the organized crime. But the number one place in the world for Bentleys to be sold was Kyiv.
Really?
Yeah.
Who knew? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh,
yeah,
man.
yeah. It was it was
Wow.
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. So you know, there was obviously there was a lot of graft there and
Right.
everything, but
Right.
most of the day-to-day person they had a much better life than people in Russia. That's
Right.
for sure.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right.
yeah.
And yeah, and so the Russians, instead of whatever they're doing, if they're the way they're destroying buildings and devastating, towns, I mean, they're making the place unlivable, uninhabitable. I mean, it
Well,
seems so crazy.
yeah, I think also the thing is that every time they do that, people in Ukraine know that if they lose, their lives are essentially over.
Mm.
And they're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their country. They're fighting for their families' lives,
Right.
and their own lives, because they know they've already seen the horrors that have been visited upon the areas that have been captured. And so that's why I think, I think that's a big reason why, outside of all the armament that they've been getting, but they're very motivated because it's self-preservation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not some poor conscript. So we're gonna mention you have a book, and we're gonna have the notes to your. We're gonna have a link to your book in the program notes.
Okay.
So we've covered kind of a wide range of things. What are you doing now?
I work as a mediator for the Circuit Court of Maryland for Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County, and every blue moon for Howard County. Mostly it's child access cases where mother and father have split, whether we're married or unmarried, and have a child or children, and one of the parents goes to the court and seeks the court's help in defining what their entitlements are in terms of spending time with their child or their children. And I'm a mediator who brings those parents together and helps them communicate. I don't decide anything. It's their lives, and we just help them to hear each other differently, and hopefully to the benefit of the children, where the children will be co-parented more logically, more amicably, and will grow up with a more normal parenting family experience. I do that. I also work for Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and for the School of Nursing as a standardized patient. That means I'm an actor, and I portray a patient so that the medical students or medical personnel, sometimes it's not students, I've done it for doctors who are residents, can hone their diagnostic skills or hone their interpersonal communication skills. And I'm also a real estate broker in both Maryland and Pennsylvania. I am on the Baltimore City Board of Ethics. That's not paid, but I do that. You asked me what I do, and so I'm on the board of directors of my condominium. I think what's in me is a desire to justify God having spared my life. I want to do something, for the time that I have left that'll be beneficial to this world and to the people of this world. So I try to do as many things as possible.
All right. Well, it sounds like you're continuing the good work, and I want to thank you for coming on my podcast and sharing your experiences. I think we went a lot of different places, and we covered a lot of things that a lot of people don't know and have never heard before.
Well, I want to thank you for having me as a guest. My book, Dust Off, More Than Met the Eye, does reflect the fact that people, the units on the ground, the people who were benefited from being evacuated, all they saw was that chopper and the Red Cross. They didn't know, they didn't probably give a minute's thought to the fact that, we came back to a heliport and we had a struggles there. So that was the hope that the book gives. I want the book to inspire other veterans to get some things off their chest, and so because a lot of veterans came back, it was not a pleasant experience, and clammed up. They did not want to talk about the war or what they did or what they saw or what they encountered. They didn't want to do that, and I think that by sharing specific things that I saw and did, maybe other veterans will be encouraged to do that. And also I want people, the citizens, to know what Vietnam veterans encountered so that they will respect the veterans of that war even more than they may do so now.
Sure. Right. Well, thank you, Arnold.
Thank you, Doc.
Yeah. So this is Orest, the official old guy from oldguytalkstome.com. I want to tell you a few things. First of all, if you have not gotten my free digital magazine, go to the standard.academy/magazine and get it. There's some articles there where they'll help you create a kick-ass life, including one secret place to touch a woman. And it's not her clitoris, because that's not a secret place. And I want you to share, rate, and review this podcast, and please do that. Until next time, remember, it's all about creating a kick-ass life for yourself and those that you love. Until next time.
Thank you for joining Dr. Orest and his incredible guest. Like what you heard and learned? Then be sure to do 3 things. 1, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. 2, share this with someone who may need to hear it. 3, leave a review and rate this podcast. Opt in at www.thestandard.academy/magazine and get our free digital magazine with savings, articles, and deeper dives into cool controversy. Be the guy who takes action. Without action, you're not going to get the results you want. Thank you again, and make it a great day.